Next up, we have a session which is entitled Stop Crunching It and Start Crushing It. All right, please join me in welcoming Shai Alfandary, who is the general manager of Paragone, and Harry Antonio, who is the head of customer service, or customer success, I should say, for Paragone, to the stage. Shai, Harry, welcome.
Good afternoon, Edwick. I'm super pumped and very excited to be here today. My name is Shai, and I'm the general manager at Paragone.ai. With me is Harry Antonio, our head of customer success, and we will try to show you a way to stop spending so much time on data crunching and truly crushing advertising performance. Ladies and gentlemen, the world has changed dramatically. Influenced by COVID-19 and more than ever before, consumers have moved indoors and online. We all know that, we all face that. And as a result, online sales have grown rapidly. In fact, entire sectors have been adjusting their online strategies to the new condition. Check out this. There's stats from ShowSpring, for example. In just 8 weeks, e-commerce has doubled as a percentage of retail sales. Years worth of commerce growth in just a few months. It is not a surprise then that the global social ad spend market is growing so rapidly, and according to Gartner, 78% of B2C CMOs indicated that they plan to shift more budgets to social this year. Why is that? Because this is where we are at as consumers. But what does it mean? What does it mean? It means that the shift puts a ton of pressure on companies to spend more on performance marketing, test new channels, find new audiences, drive return on ad spend, and ramp up teams in-house as they need to build a new strategic muscle they can no longer automatically outsource and forget about. And for global brands with multiple agencies, multiple locations, many sub-brands and distributed teams, this becomes a global challenge that requires many companies to accelerate their digital transformation plans so that they can get everyone on the same page. With social advertising and performance marketing now getting so much attention, the divide between executives and social advertising practitioners is only going to increase. More questions will be asked, more reports to be sent. You can't sit back anymore. You can't sit back and noodle on the data in your Facebook business managers anymore, downloading to Excel and creating pivot table for a whole day, or waiting until Tableau will extract the data of some offline report just to realize that something is broken on the way, something broke on the way, and you will have to file a ticket to IT, and one day they'll get back to you. This vicious circle doesn't work anymore. Questions need to be answered in real time. They have to be answered now, right? And this puts social media teams in the hot seat. To be successful, you'll now need to be able to get better insights faster, quickly evaluate social performance holistically, navigate more channels, ad accounts, data globally, bridge the gap between what Facebook is telling you versus what Google says, for example. take more actions and creative decisions, and do that in real time, and generate more reports so you can prove your return on ad spend. If you can't do that at scale, the implications are that more time will be spent on data crunching and less time on insight. And that will end up hurting performance, creating team fatigue. And you end up simply throwing good money after bad money. That's never a good thing. The thing is that if you don't do anything to change this right now, soon you'll find yourself overloaded with data, spending time on mundane, low-value work and number crunching instead of unleashing your creativity and focusing on strategy, which is probably why we all chose to work in marketing, right? Here's an example from one of our customers in the personal care space. These guys spend $15 million in social ad spend a year. They run circa 100 campaigns concurrently across 8 different countries with Facebook and Instagram, and they wanted to add Snapchat and Pinterest and keep on exploring new networks. And the head of performance there simply faced this challenge, which she said, it's impossible to optimize social spend when they are running 100 campaigns manually. Think about it. She manages 100 campaigns concurrently and take just 2 decisions a day. That's 70,000 decisions on someone's money manually. 70,000 manual decisions on someone's money. And if all you have to manage your business is, say, an Excel sheet, and the business managers the network provide you, well, you know, they tend to sometimes guard their own cream, you may be in trouble, because no one can do that accurately, and no one should expect you to do that performantly. Yeah, Harry, there must be some kind of way out of here. There is too much confusion. Can you help?
There is a way out of the confusion. To get there, we'll start by looking at one of the main culprits driving an overload of data crunching, reporting requirements, from the perspective of a typical paid social team, which is at the front end of the reporting process. So from here, if you look at both ends of the process, you'll immediately notice a divide in how advertising data is interpreted and ingested. With social advertising and performance marketing now getting heightened attention, as you're talking about, this divide intensifies between executives and the social advertising practitioners. So more questions are being asked that need to be answered faster, putting social ad teams in the hot seat. And the efforts to answer these questions are really much like the process of making a smoothie. Data in its raw form, the kind campaign managers live in every day, is much like the fresh fruit still waiting to be plucked. It's messy, scattered, and sitting in individual pieces. But executives can't afford to be bogged down in the vines. They need the smoothie. They need all this data collected, consolidated, and blended into the key insights that will drive the business forward. And so what you have in most organizations is tools and processes, largely still manual, developed to effect this transformation. But there's the missing step here. When you go to make a smoothie, you don't take your blender to the farm. You go to the grocery store, because it is there that all of your ingredients have been nicely sorted, tagged, organized for selection. And it's the same with data aggregation. To get to the dashboard from the source data, you need analysis. And yet so many teams try to create the smoothie without building the store, which is a real shame because I personally love grocery stores. I'm a little biased. We have Publix here in Florida where shopping is a pleasure, but your data analysis should be too. And when it isn't, it exists only as a pass-through. And if it exists only as a pass-through, it's not usable. To be usable, your analysis layer should be able to stand on its own. If it's a set of tables being copied, pasted, pivoted, and graphed, it's not usable. If it's a set of naming conventions that get automatically converted into graphs, it's not usable. Useful, perhaps, because it does get you the smoothie, but not usable. This concept of usability is important because when your analysis layer exists merely as a pass-through, as a means to an end, you have to start from scratch remaking the smoothie every time you tweak the recipe. This means that every time your CMO or anyone looking at the data has a question that isn't answered by the one dashboard, your team has to go back to the source data and build it anew, collect it, analyze it, present it, repeat this process for long enough, and eventually the questions don't get asked. The asking becomes expensive and painful, and that creative and inquisitive spirit we'd all like to bring to the job every day isn't allowed to flourish. But if you do have a robust analysis layer, it allows you to go back to the store. It allows you to easily explore things like which audiences are performing better, which creative concepts are performing better, which business initiatives are best suited for which channels, and so on. Once you have and start living in this analysis layer, this opens up a whole world of possibilities for driving alignment and insights. And I'll touch briefly here on a few suggestions on how you can use this to think about your data in different ways. By aligning that analysis to business objectives, pivoting on dimensions important to your business, and just simply knowing your ads better. The structure on the left here is where most of us start, and will look familiar to anyone who spent any time at all in Ads Manager. Facebook rolled out its 3-level ad campaign structure in 2014. And we've been building our reporting around these levels for the last 7 years. This is the publisher's structure, not your business's structure. Your reporting should match your business's structure. Once you have the right structure in place and your advertising data is starting to look more like your business, you have to make sure you're bringing in the right dimensions of data to speak to the important questions. We too often think only in terms of establishing the right KPIs. What is our objective? What should metrics be tracking? And we've come a long way as an industry to really focusing in on what's important when it comes to metrics. We've evolved from impressions to likes to clicks, cost per lead, add to cart, sales, ultimately return on ad spend. But the metrics are only half of the story. And making the most of the dimensions across which you view these metrics is the area where I still see a lot of advertisers struggling. To illustrate, let's look at a case here where one of the team's goals is to have their ad spend diversified across channels and product segments. And so we look at channel split within business lines, and it looks great. And we bring in product segment for another view and have these 2 views and call it a dashboard. Great, right? Well, not so great, because if we actually bring in all 3 of these dimensions together, we can see that we actually aren't diversified at all. What's happened in this case is that each individual product manager chose the one channel they thought might work best and didn't bother exploring out from there at all. But you would never see this from the first 2 views, no matter how many times your team recompiled and refreshed the data. To get there, it really requires a shift in thinking, to spend as much time exploring your data's dimensions as you do your key metrics. The last point I'll touch on here in leveraging your analysis layer is to make your visual elements part of your analysis. And I don't mean taking a screenshot and pasting it over your charts. If you want to understand what's working, what isn't, and why, then this needs to be an integral part of your data. Now, I won't say impossible without it, but I assure you, it is several magnitudes more difficult to derive a powerful creative insight from looking at a row that says something like woman with dark glasses than it is from a view that brings in that image. Rashad Tabakawala gave a great presentation on the first day of this conference. I hope some of you got to see it, and made a great point about how you can't just display data or computations. You need to bring something to it. Well, including all of your creative dimensions, including visuals in your data dimensions, is a great first step in arriving at the kind of insights that will give you a point of view worth sharing. So if you spend more time living in your analysis layer and make use of it in some of the ways we've discussed, well then, Shai, to answer your question, yes, you might just be able to break through the confusion and get some relief.
Harry, that's so helpful. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This is really great. But do you mind if I get a second opinion?
From whom?
So there is a person I've known for quite some time. His name is David Kobe. He has tons of experience as an operator and executive at large companies, as well as a VC-backed startup as the head of growth. He knows a lot about it, and I just wanted to ask him, what does he think about the topic, and what's his perspective? David, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you for having me here, Shai. So I've been a customer of Paragone for the past 3 years. I've used them both in a mature organization where I was managing a budget of millions of dollars, and now where I am a sole practitioner operator as the head of growth and e-commerce. So here I wear many different hats. And so my time is valuable, right? So I need to be able to assess the performance and then act quickly and deploy my team in the way that drives the most revenue for the organization effectively, right? So in each of the use cases, right, whether it's in a large organization that has mature tools like business intelligence, data science teams, et cetera, the tool is still very relevant. And here it's relevant too, right? So it boils down to three separate use cases, and all of them tied to analysis, right? So consolidation of all of the data sources in one place, super helpful, right? So now my marketing mix is spread across 3 or 4 different channels. In the past, I'd have to copy and paste all the different information into one Excel spreadsheet, as Harry alluded to, and that would be very time costly. And so when I'm doing that, I'm wasting time and I'm not getting an opportunity to really analyze. In Paragone, I have the opportunity to pivot and create different views and dimensions based on media costs, right? For instance, one of the tools that I was using at Stash was I was tracking CPMs across all of the different channels, right? And so you can create a line graph that shows how CPMs compare across Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest, et cetera, and that becomes really helpful based on the goals that you're striving for. The second piece, again, as Harry mentioned, the different views, right? I could dimension in a number of different ways. The reports are beautiful, very easy to see where the opportunities are. I could even add custom dimensions, right? Dimensions that are only visible to me, right? Via tags and labels. So if I wanted to see how one model, for instance, is performing against another model in the fashion industry, I can see that. And then the other thing, I could segment based on product line, right? So at Stash Invest, we had a number of different product lines. We had Stash Invest, which was the main business. And then we had Stash Mobile Banking, which is the product that I was responsible for growing. And so there I had to create a number of different iterations of the same ad to compare different feature sets, right? Which feature set resonates with which user. And so that was really helpful. The second piece is, again, as was mentioned before, is reporting and sharing dashboards, right? So I can create a separate dashboard for the C-suite. The C-suite typically cares about ROAS, right? They want to understand the return on their investment. And then separately, I could create a separate dashboard for a creative team, a more visual dashboard, right? So I would dimension off of creative assets, and people can see, like the stakeholders on the creative team can see which assets are performing best visually. And then the third part is product teams, right? No part of organization is immune to understanding the impact of paid marketing, right? So the product team needs to understand which product features are resonating the most. And so I could let them know. And not only that, but I could also let them know which age groups, what what demographics are really responding to what features. And then the third thing, actionability, right? I never have to leave this platform. I can do it all in one place. So if I see an opportunity on TikTok, I can go right in and allocate more spend there. And if I see underperformance on Facebook, I could take some money away. And then the other piece in terms of actionability would be the recommendation engine. And so a lot of us are doing a lot of different things, and it's important to have a second eye. And luckily, Paragone has a recommendation engine. So one of the recommendations I actually received today, right? So it's an AI-based algorithm that lets you know where the opportunities are. So one of the recommendations I received today was that our denim line is underperforming against women that are aged 45 to 54. Some of that might make sense and maybe intuitive, but the same demographic performs really well with dresses. And so like all three things combined have saved me a ton of time, and all I have is great recommendations for this product. It's very unique, and it's become an essential part of my MarTech stack, and I've carried it everywhere. Thank you.
David, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And I, from both of your comments, I truly feel that there is a way of getting out of those mazes of data that I see people typically sinking in. Harry, with that, let's move to some key takeaways. Very good. So number one, everyone is crunching and feeling the data overload. That's, we all know that. Secondly, what got you here won't get you there. The overload of media spend, the attention, the expectations have risen so much that you can't just continue to do things business as usual. With the right tools, you can gain insight quickly and crush it. And lastly, bridge the gap between executives and performance teams for better organization and communication. With that, if you're more of less of a visual person and you like to see a video to get those key takeaways, we prepared a little video for you. So Edwick, if you don't mind, play us another video here.
Thanks so much, guys. That was great. Number of questions coming in from the audience, but I want to kick off with a question of my own. During the presentation, you've touched on the fact that marketers are sort of, drowning in a sea of data or lost in the maze of data. And we speak to marketers all the time, and we hear this feedback pretty consistently that obviously they're looking for increased performance, right? So you touched on the 20% uplift in ROAS, which is obviously great, but they're also looking particularly to companies like yours to make it easier, to make it more straightforward, and to sort of take some of that overwhelm out of the process of data analysis. Can you talk about some of the most important ways in which you are looking to try and achieve that and basically just make the world of data marketing that much more straightforward for people?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this. This is a great question. Well, first of all, I think that the two main ways of analyzing the data is either to go to the source, what Harry shows us the ingredients, or go to the kind of like the the end results, let's call it the Tableau or BI. I mean, these are great tools, but when you kind of like look at am I going to the business manager, downloading my data and look at the raw data and trying to figure out how to answer a question versus waiting until I get some answers from an extract that goes to my IT and then run a report once in a while. We think that there is a layer in between. That layer is where we think our innovation is, and that's what we call the analytical layer. And here, what we want to pull is real-time data from more and more sources that eventually help performance marketers, growth marketers, get to insights faster. Because otherwise, you keep on spending time in spreadsheets and communications and collaboration around that. So if you have this kind of like actionable performance monitoring environment where you can connect all the data sources together in a way that the system actually understands you, understands the context, that's where our innovation is. It's not just for the sake of visualizing the data. It's for the sake of visualizing the data, but also understanding the semantics of it. And when you connect on top, AI, machine learning, benchmarking, then you become truly smarter. And that's where our innovation is.
Harry, I have a question for you. This come in from the audience. Obviously, as someone who is focused on growth, particularly obviously in e-commerce, the real-time aspect of data is key for you in terms of being able to make critically important decisions, particularly around the performance of campaigns. What is your go-to metric? Like, what do you look at first to really glean the most amount of insight from the least amount of data?
Well, the answer to that question really depends on the business. There are a lot of important metrics to track, of course, CTR, conversion rate, CPA. But the most important ones are the ones that are going to be aligned with your business objectives. So if you're going to managing to a quarterly sales goal, then it's sales. If you have relatively low cost of capital and can scale somewhat indefinitely, then it's ROAS. It's really not a one-size-fits-all in regards to what those most important key metrics are, but rather what's important to your business. But I would also urge you in the audience to keep in mind one of the points I touched on earlier, which is that the dimensions are equally as important. And consider how your business units and products are organized, and then overlay that structure onto your advertising data and establish your goal for each of those levels of attributes and each of those levels of your business. And you'll be a lot more efficient.
And David, I actually, what I meant to do is to direct that question to you. So sorry, Harry, although your answer was fantastic. David, if you wouldn't mind answering the same question, because obviously in the context of e-commerce and growth in your role, I'm curious, like, what is that kind of go-to metric from your perspective?
Yeah, so Harry kind of stole my thunder there in the question. So yeah, it really does depend on business, right? Stash Invest had heavily venture backed, right? We had a lot of money to spend on advertising. And so the goal there was growth at all costs, right? And we were optimizing towards payback, right? Payback is how long would it take us to retrieve the money that we're spending on advertising, right? Here at Retrofit, where it's a bootstrap company, we're operating at an $18 million run rate. But the money's still important, right? There's not an endless amount of money, and we intend on staying bootstrapped. The stakes are a little bit higher, and so I'm optimizing, at least on the front end, for return on ad spend, right? How many high spenders can I capture with the campaign or with the creative? And creative is incredibly important, right? Whether it be here in fashion or at Stash Invest, right? That's a key differentiator now, and I think it's going to continue to be so with iOS 14 on the horizon. And so the one piece of the pie that we didn't really touch on is the workflow optimization that Paragone offers, right? So now I could launch 50 different variants all at once in a span of 20 minutes, right? So I'm quick to market, quick to get out. I see what's working, see what's not working, and I move on.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, guys, we're out of time. Really appreciate you joining us during Social Media Week. Paragone, thanks so much for your partnership. Also, Shai, Harry, David, really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks.